Board is now in order. Commissioners, that's what I'll do first. Commissioner Fathman, are you here?
I'm here.
Commissioner Robinson, are you here?
Yes.
Commissioner Richardson, are you here?
Here.
Commissioner Colleen, are you here?
Here.
Commissioner Vines, are you here?
Yes.
I am present. I don't think I've overlooked any commissioners. We'll update this as more people come. Commissioners, has anybody read the minutes of the February 2019 meeting? Okay, no one has read those. They may not even have been sent to us, for all I know.
I think March was the last meeting, right?
What's that?
Did we have a meeting in March?
Did we have a meeting in March?
Yep, you did.
I believe those were sent.
Not the March minutes.
Okay. Well, we will deal with those at a future date. Commissioners, take a look at the agenda. Does anyone need to recuse him or herself from hearing any of these items?
Item C for me.
Item C for Colleen.
Item C for Richardson.
C for Richardson. Otherwise, is the order of this agenda fine with everybody?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, then, let's begin. Agenda item A, 1022 South 18th Street.
Jane Cameron from the Cultural Resources Office. Catch up here. This is a proposal, a preliminary review application to construct a new single-family house on this site. This is in an odd, not really a cul-de-sac, but you'll see further. Here it is. This is the location. It is directly adjacent to the Harris Road City Landmark, which are those 8 or so buildings directly south of the site. One of the things I will point out very quickly is that there is a sewer issue with the site because it runs through the property, but that has been addressed. It has been the death of a couple of other projects proposed for the site. This is the site plan with a garage at the alley. And proposed building next to the Harris Road. Now, the Harris Road houses are fairly small in scale for Lafayette Square. This property is based on a model example in elsewhere, which is allowable under the new Lafayette Square standards. It doesn't have, and no longer does a historic model example have to be from the square itself, as long as it's of the appropriate vintage. And this is based on 1920 Rutger. Now, I will say that what you're seeing in the application is a stucco front. That has been addressed, and it will be now a brick front to match the model example. There's a long list of deviations that in your agenda. I believe that the property owners and their contractor have agreed to pretty much all of them. So just to expedite this, I will very quickly state that they have rearranged the windows on the north elevation. The details of the windows will be changed according to what Crow and the Lafayette Square Development Committee requested. This was a proposal to screen what is going to be a very visible rear elevation. Can you hear me? A very visible rear elevation with a lot of glass, which is important to the homeowners. So the compromise that has been agreed to is that these openings will be screened by having decks or roofs over them to kind of hide the glazing from the street. Now, as we look around, this is looking towards the site, and this is Harris Road. And so is this, heading south. It says north, but it's south. Context opposite. And this is interesting. The northern elevation of the house will face this area, which is looking towards Shoto. So you can see that the streets turn around this property. Okay. So with the requirement that all of the issues raised by the Crow staff and the Lafayette Square Development Committee are addressed, the staff is recommending that the board grant preliminary approval. I have to submit the Lafayette Square letter, which is generally in agreement, subject to the revisions that I've spoken of, and a letter from Alderman Christine Gracia in support of it. Now, one of the things that is still to be addressed is the sidewalk, which varies at this particular agency, and that would be another stipulation that we would address once we get further along in the design review.
For the record, what is the address of the historic model example?
920 Rutgers.
Just note a correction in the agenda then. Questions on this side?
No, sir. Yes, sorry. So, yeah, I was confused because the report's Lammy, but so 920 Rutger, is that
Is it
LaSalle?
Lammy or Rutger, John?
It is Lammy, okay. And so that
Okay.
is that Soulard then? So what the ordinance says is the model example is supposed to be located in close proximity to the site. So is our interpretation that 920 Lammy is in close proximity to the site?
Well, the new standards allow a model example from elsewhere in the area, as long as it is of the appropriate vintage, which this building is.
So what's cited in the report, is that the new standard or?
Well, apparently that's the old standard.
Okay. Okay, and then one more question. The sidewalk thing, I didn't understand that.
Well, sorry, I thought I had photographs of it, and perhaps the Lafayette Square representative will talk about it. But right now, the sidewalk is very wide on the house adjacent to the south. So there has to be some kind of appropriate combination with this property, maybe not as wide, but some kind of a design. And that has not really been addressed at all, other than everyone agrees that some appropriate measures should be taken.
And that's part of your purview, is to work that out?
Yes,
Okay, cool. And you will work it out?
yes, I hope so.
You could make the other sidewalk narrower.
I don't think that would be a happy thing.
Questions on this side? Thank you very much, Jan. Okay, we have the applicant. Mr. Mullen.
Hello, my name is John Muller, Diversified Real Estate Group. Do you need my address or not?
Yeah, we'd like to find you again.
Sounds good. We have worked extensively with Lafayette Square and Jan Cameron. We've agreed to make all these changes, including allowing Lafayette Square to review the plans one more time, as well as Jan Cameron, before we get a building permit. So we're on board with everything.
Before Commissioner Richardson asks you, what are you going to do about that sidewalk?
We haven't had a chance to work out the details on the sidewalk because we just heard about it today. But the majority of that sidewalk is actually in city property. So that's a detail we'll have to work out with Lafayette Square and with Jan. But we are planning on addressing it one way or another.
Questions on this side? Questions on this side? Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Ms. Sessions?
Suzanne Sessions, 1831 Kennett Place. May I approach the bench? Show you.
I'm leaving, so, no. Yes. Wait, what are you going to show us?
What, the picture, I only have it on a cell phone. If you, the sidewalk issue.
Show what?
He's seen it.
Okay, then we're fine.
It's still an issue. I was concerned that you did not understand what it looked like, and that's why I was going to show you the picture.
I
If you
think
didn't-
we're good.
good?
Understanding that you're going to,
Fine.
he's going to work with the Lafayette Square
Yes,
Restoration
yes.
Committee and Jan on it. I'm familiar with it.
Yeah, the reason it came up is because at our development committee meeting last Tuesday, it didn't come up. It didn't come up by the developer or anybody else. And I found out about it afterwards from the adjacent neighbor who was concerned that it had not come up for discussion. But if it can be handled, that's fine, and we know it's a problem and has to be done. And if all of the issues that we addressed in our letter to Preservation Board, Development, and Cultural Resource can be met. And we can see those changes that be Lafayette Square Development Committee. We would happy to go along with this. And so I had talked to John Mueller about seeing those changes. He said he would send them to us as he got them. So, if we can get all those, we will be very happy. All right.
Questions?
Well, yeah, I got one. So, one question I had for Jan, I forgot to ask, and I see it in the letter here, is like, so the model example had the Baltimore chimney, but his drawing didn't. But this, I don't know whose writing this is. Is he doing the?
Philip's writing, Philip Lambert's writing. He'll be here, but he won't be here till 5. We're tag teaming.
But is he doing a Baltimore chimney then?
He's doing one,
Okay.
which is fine.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah. And just another thing about when we revised our code, we did revise our code to say that you can take a model example outside of Lafayette Square as long as it is of the same period and style and be approved by Cultural Resource. So that's what the code says now.
Right.
Commissioners, that concludes the testimony in this matter. Commissioner Hamilton, have you got a motion?
No.
Okay.
Yes. I'll defer it to.
Commissioner Robinson, have you got a motion? Does anybody on the left side of the table have a motion?
I move that the Preservation Board grant preliminary approval of the proposed new construction with the condition that the details that were presented by Cultural Resources Office be revised to more closely follow the historic model example, and that the glass area of the rear elevation be screened with an appropriate 2-story deck.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. Okay, Commissioners, agenda item B is 3318 Lemp Avenue. Is the owner or developer present?
Yes.
I don't need to hear from you yet, I just didn't see you on the sheet.
Sorry, just got here, sorry.
That's okay, I'll call you in just a minute.
This is, I think, is the third time maybe that the board has seen this project. It's a proposal to build a single family on this property as part of a larger development that's been happening. And I don't want to take up a lot of your time on this, but this is the larger development. It includes a rehab that was funded by CDA a couple of years ago. There's a permit out for a single-family new construction, and on the north side of this little house, which I should get to, the little house in the center, which is, no, what do they call it? The cottage, the workers' cottage, right? Which will have an addition, and then there will be a small single-family on the south side of that. So what you're seeing is the initial submission that was approved by the board in the upper frame, and behind, now the existing proposal is here, and that was approved by the Preservation Board at its December meeting with the condition that the building elevations on the sides would be entirely brick. This is not an appeal because this is a preliminary review and it's never went to a permit, but I believe that the developer is asking for a reduction in the requirement of brick. And what he's proposing is to take it back 25 feet, which is more than he had originally intended to do, similar to the house, and this is the new construction at 3310 Lemp. The issue with that is 3310 Lemp was actually designed to look like it should have, the brick should have ended where it does, because it has the L on the back that's set back. This is the proposal for the extension of brick. Because this property is smaller than what was originally proposed, both of these side elevations are going to be street visible. In fact, the one on the right, the south facade, there's about 20 feet between it and the adjacent house. Okay. And just very briefly, looking at the context, there's the little workers' cottage. And the context. So the staff has brought this back for the Preservation Board to allow the developer to, in essence, appeal your original condition that you placed on it. Any questions?
And you're recommending that we do so?
Yeah.
Would you like to expand on that?
No.
We want the project to proceed. We don't want to kill the project. So I explained to Matt that it was up to him to make his case and bring actual facts and figures to you for your determination.
Is it your testimony, if we do not do this, that it will kill the project?
That is his contention.
Okay. Then I look forward to hearing that.
Okay.
Hello, my name is Matthew Hardig. I'm with Rubicon Corporation. This house in question, 3318 Lemp, the reason why we are so far from the neighbors is we are also trying to be good neighbors. We are deeding 10 feet of the current lot to the neighbor on the right once construction begins. So I really would like to have put another elevation of 3310 over here, but it won't fit because of our agreement with the neighbor. So now I'm trying to get this worked out. We did come up with an addendum to our plan that exists now that you approved with full brick, is we added 2 feet to each side of the house to give it an exact brick break. So when it comes back and returns, it comes back to a siding elevation. That keeps us within our lot lines, makes the house slightly wider. And to take brick all the way back was $38,000. This change here is about $7,000. And the $38,000 would kill the project, would kill this house for sure.
Do you have anything to show the board?
I don't, I'm sorry, I came from another meeting and I was fighting traffic to get here.
I'm trying to understand, what cost $38,000?
To run brick all the way back from our original proposed.
So,
Both sides.
both
two stories.
sides, $38,000?
Yeah.
And do you have a bid or something we can see for?
I don't have it with me, but I have it from Miller and Miller.
You have several bids?
I'm sorry?
Did you get like 3 bids on that?
So far, they're the only ones that actually bid to us.
Seems a little high. And what's the $7,000 figure?
To add the 2-foot bump out to the foundation, so it's additional hardwood, additional painting, drywall, all that goes along with adding 2 feet on each side of the house to give it an exact brick break.
Okay, thank you.
More questions on the right side?
So it's a net savings of 31 or it's a net savings of 38?
What?
Questions on this side? Jen, I don't remember. Did you say neighborhood approval, aldermanic approval,
I don't have any of
any
that.
approval? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
What? That's a good question. Did you go to the neighborhood association with this?
Not this change, no.
I have a motion.
Yes, sir.
Are you taking a motion?
Yes.
Okay. I move that the Preservation Board deny preliminary approval of this, this idea. Mayor, that's my motion.
Second?
Second.
Well, my reasoning for this is forever in Benton Park that we'll be looking at this siting, and for this to be based upon no evidence whatsoever, just Rubicon's word. I mean, respect this firm, but we need, I would say at least a couple of bids here, and that seems like a really high number for brick back there. So,
Well, and I'd
not
feel,
enough to go on that.
I was gonna say, I'd feel better if it had some reaction from the neighborhood on it too. So there's no prejudice in denying a preliminary review. He can come back when he has bids and neighborhood evaluation, right, Jan?
Yeah, you can come back as many times as you like.
Any discussion on this side?
We could also add drawings that show what's actually happening with that recess so that we can actually see what that
Drawings,
looks like.
consultation, yeah,
Yeah.
bills, bids.
But it's certainly a very good suggestion.
Right.
Yeah.
My motion is just to deny, but those are good ideas.
I mean, we do not have subpoena power. I've been on this board for a while and was unaware of that. Come back if you want then. Commissioners, there's a motion on the floor. It's been made and seconded. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Commissioners who have recused themselves can sit here, just not participate in the discussion, unless they're presenting, in which case they should go sit someplace else. Agenda item C is 2300 Lasalle. Big copy for me.
All right. Well, this agenda item is new construction at 2300 LaSalle in the Lafayette Square Historic District. This is a preliminary review project. I have support email from Alderwoman Ingracia and the support letter from the Lafayette Square Neighborhood Association that, Donna, if you pass those down. And I have, I don't have one for each, so if folks don't mind sharing those. There should be enough for every two people to look at one. So what I'd like to do is walk through the site and the design and explain the project and why the staff is recommending support for it, and then I'll take any questions. So this is the site. It's at the corner of LaSalle in Missouri in the Lafayette Square neighborhood. And I'm sorry, this is going to be a little hard to read, but a key component to the decision to rewrite the Lafayette Square standards recently, which have only been in effect for about 60 days, quite honestly, but a key aspect of that was, and the neighborhood can speak to this as well if they so choose, but we all sat through the Pulte Praxair site project a couple years ago now, and the group, I think it's fair to say, was strongly admonished by the board to think about revising their standards to provide more clarity as to what kind of projects would be appropriate in the northwest quadrant of the neighborhood along Choteau Avenue and LaSalle and Missouri and Jefferson. So the neighborhood went ahead and did that. There was a lot of consultation with CRO staff, and I think we came out with a pretty good product to guide historic design or new construction design in the context of that northwest quadrant of the neighborhood. So basically the way those standards are structured is there's three sort of levels of design development that are required. So for example, the project you just looked at from Mr. Muller is in sort of the historic core of the neighborhood where there's lots of historic context everywhere you look. And there, the standards haven't changed much. They mainly require a historic model example. You saw the one tweak that was done, which was the standards used to say it had to be from the Lafayette Square neighborhood. Now the standards say it can be from anywhere in the city as long as it's appropriate in design for the Lafayette Square neighborhood. So that's one type of area. Now the other two areas are the areas you see kind of up here, kind of shaded in the corner there. And you'll notice most of it is this one color of gray that goes along Shoto. And that is an area that has, I would say, the most allows the most broad design allowances for new construction, because there is virtually no historic context for all of those lots. Then you have a couple other areas, notably the lot, I'm sorry, my hands are a little shaky, lot right there at the corner of Missouri and LaSalle, that has a little bit of historic context, but not too much. And there, the new standards require the use of a historic model example, but they allow a lot more latitude from that model example. I would say there is a case where the word based on a model example is really important. And it is not so important that there be a replication of a historic model example, which is more what's required in the historic core of the neighborhood. So the applicants have gone ahead and hired architects. The original design, this is a closer view of the site. So just a second on this. So you'll see the anticipation is that there will be new development all along this Shoto corridor here. And here's our site with a historic building on the corner that I will say, when you're out there, this parking lot really does provide a significant separation between the buildings. And I would say the requirement for a sort of an in-depth design relationship is less so here than in other parts of the neighborhood. Next to that, you'll see we have a little stone remnant of a building that we're hoping will get preserved in the future. And then going up Missouri, you have more historic context. Although frankly, this building here in the middle of Hickory is far from historic, it's new. So as you'll see in the pictures, there is a basis for historic design here, but the neighborhood has supported, and I think rightfully so, a significant latitude from that based on the environment we're in. So here's a view of the site. So now we're on LaSalle looking west towards Missouri. So Shoto's over here. Jefferson is the street off in the distance. And this building is kind of a pink-colored industrial building from sometime in the late 19th century, I would say. Here's a close-up of that building, which is roughly the equivalent of a 3-story building height. I will say one more thing about, I'm going the wrong way. I mean, the massing of this building is not a typical Lafayette Square. You know, when we think of Lafayette Square, we think of Harris Row, we think of townhouses, we think of some attached rows of buildings, but the scale is pretty small. This building, you know, is in bulk much wider than a typical Lafayette Square structure. If you consider that almost all the structures in Lafayette Square are residential, there isn't a lot of commercial architecture, although there is some. So now we're looking south. It says north, but we're actually looking south on Missouri. The person who wrote this slide is obviously challenged in terms of direction. That would be me. So as you can see here, we're going up the hill, and that is very significant because the standards are written to basically take into account the change in grade that happens all the way from Park Avenue, which is up where the park is, where Lafayette Park is, all the way down streets like Missouri and McKay and Mississippi to Shoto Avenue. And what that allows for is some increased heights of building than is typical in Lafayette Square, while at the same time not creating wildly disjunctive building heights between what will become the northern edge of the neighborhood along Shoto and the core of the neighborhood further south up towards the park, literally up towards the park. So here's some context going up Missouri. The picture on the left mainly is taken to show the context of that stone remnant building, which I think we're all hopeful will be reused as a occupied structure in the future. And then behind that, on the picture on the right gives a better sense of this, is the row of structures on Missouri Avenue itself, going south towards the park up at the top of the hill. So that's the historic context, but really I think in a lot of ways what this building is most going to relate to is the future development of the vacant parcels and the industrial and the underutilized parcels to the east and to the north. So for example, the pictures we're looking at here are of the Praxair site. So this would essentially be from the corner of Lasalle and Missouri, where the building is proposed. Looking again at Praxair, that's vacant, kind of derelict property. And then this is a view, the picture is actually taken from the back of the lot, looking through the lot where the new building is proposed, but you can see the context over towards Shoto, which is off in the distance here. The anticipation is that the building there on the left that's kind of a industrial building for Mack Truck is probably going to be removed and will be replaced by new construction, as will the Praxair site have new construction. And the main context, therefore, for this site will be whatever that new construction turns out to be over there. And there's an anticipation, again, taking advantage of the height variation and the fact that you are on Shoto on the other side of the street here, which is a major arterial street, that you'll get taller structures on that site as well than is typical of the 3-story buildings that populate Lafayette Square. So this is a perspective of the building that's being proposed. To the right is the Lasalle Facade, and to the left is the Missouri Avenue facade. Notice how far this shows that the setback on the Missouri side, which is here. Mm-hmm. And the purpose of that is to allow a generous green space out in front and align this building with the stone remnant building we saw on Missouri a few minutes ago in the context slides. This is 1107 Mississippi. I'm sure folks are probably familiar with this, on Mississippi Avenue, just to the south of Shoto, and it serves as the model example. Now, I will say, historically, in the evolution of this design, thinking of the history of projects in Lafayette Square under the old standards and just in general, the initial proposal for the building we're looking at today was a very representational, almost copy of this building. And when the neighborhood saw that, their reaction was, and Suzanne, you or Phil can speak to this, was, we don't think this is a very attractive building, number one, and number two, we wrote these standards to give you more latitude, so take it. So that is what the architects have come and done. So we have streetscape elevations. As you see here, let me go back actually. We have a 5-story model example. They have maintained the 5 stories. And so, again, this is our little stone building right here. And these are the buildings on Mississippi. And the buildings will only, the grade only steepens from here going up that hill. So looking at the neighborhood kind of in cross-section, we don't have this all the way, but looking at the neighborhood in cross-section, we think that in the overall scope of the neighborhood, this will fit into the context and also will need to and relate well to the larger context that we think is likely to come in across LaSalle between Shoto and Missouri. You can see the facade here is brick to relate to the brick of the historic buildings that are located there. There are some balconies here to kind of break up the facade. It's a nice amenity for the residents who would live there, and it also makes the design a little more visually interesting and a little less monotonous, shall we say. This is the Lasalle Facade. So the Lasalle Facade has 3 bays of brick, and then interspersed with bays that are glass with Corten steel panels that run horizontally at the base of those. And you can see they just march down the street that way. This is the industrial building over at the corner. If this building were located here, I would be more concerned about the difference in height between the 2 structures. But when you're out on the street, it really feels like a significant separation between those 2. And as a director, I'm comfortable with that, especially considering what the context will be going into the Praxair site and going into the Mack Truck site. These are just sort of more blown up elevation drawings. And this is the elevation on the west. And you can see you've got brick on the side that's going to front mostly towards the street. And you've got panels here, but I don't think, again, they're not going to be highly visible. And you've got brick on the majority of that facade. Here's the site plan. So these are, I should say, let me go back. Let me go back. Yeah. The ground floor here, actually that's the wrong elevation. Let me go back more. We want the north elevation. So this is the north elevation. It'll front on LaSalle. The ground floor, it will be a mixture of leasing office, some space that's used for the tenants in the building, and then some commercial space as well. The upper floors, these designs on the inside, the floor plans are actually two sets of stacked townhouses. So the first floor will be the kind of commercial-ish space, and then you'll have 2 floor of townhouse, and then 2 floor of townhouse above that. And then on the back, we have our parking garage here. The parking garage, actually, because of the grading, will enter onto the second floor, which will be the place where the residential units begin. So for the tenants, I think that'll be a helpful amenity that they enter there. And again, we're using the changes in grade here to help make that work. You see here the relationship between the stone building down here and the design of the green space here. Here's your parking lot. One thing I will say about the new Lafayette Square standards is they were very thoughtful in terms of caring about the parking lots in the neighborhood, and not just in terms of screening parking lots, is what we typically see in most historic districts. They were very interested in using best practices as much as possible in terms of trying to use green practices as well. So we have, one thing you'll notice in the write-up is these quote-unquote islands that kind of jut out here are not quite as wide as the standards allow. That's one of the areas where this proposal does slightly deviate from what's in the standards. And that's directly addressed in the letter from the neighborhood. And that concludes my presentation. I'd just like to briefly walk through the standards a little bit with you. Again, our recommendation is to grant preliminary approval for the mixed-use building with final design details completed in coordination with Cultural Resources Office staff. I'm not going to go over what complies in the write-up, which most of this does. I do want to speak briefly to 35.8, which I apologize, I don't have page numbers on my write-up, but it's the third to last page of the verbiage, and that is it references siding of vinyl, aluminum, fiber, cement, metal paneling, or wood of any type, style, or color is prohibited on any facade visible from the street. So one of the things that makes this design interesting is the use of those Corten steel horizontal pieces. So we have partly complies. I have to say a lot of, and I wish I had put a slide in here, but I think folks, we're all knowledgeable about development in St. Louis. It's quite common these days to see metal paneling as an entire facade of a building. I can think of a couple of buildings in the Grove that do that. It's just not that uncommon. I think my suspicion is, and the neighborhood can speak to this, there was a fear of doing that. I think the Corten steel here is just a chance to enliven the facade by having those panels, but it isn't a wall of paneling, which I think is what would be deleterious to the neighborhood. And finally, on the next page, 305.10 rather, D, there is a cornice on the model example. There is not a cornice on the proposed building here. There was some discussion back and forth with the neighborhood. I think folks are comfortable with that. And the staff is not requiring it because we are not requiring a rigorous replication of the model example, just a design based upon sort of the spirit of the model example. And as I mentioned down at 500.1D, the parking islands, quote unquote, because they're not truly islands, they're more like peninsulas, are just a teeny bit narrower than the design standards require. And with that, I will conclude my remarks.
Fine.
No questions.
Commissioners on this side? Commissioner Robinson is formulating a question.
Yeah.
He is not formulating a question. He is thinking about dinner. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, let's hear from the applicant. It's-
You can if you want, or if you want to operate from over there, I can push the buttons for you.
Okay, you don't have one.
Please arrange the presentation in any order that you want.
So,
Let's see.
Mike, I can't remember, is this a swear-in thing? No, this is a preliminary review, so you know who I am. All right, well, I'm gonna wait for this to come up. I'll pass out copies of what he's about to.
So what am I doing here? PDF, so it's not going to be it.
Yeah, that's true.
I wonder how many hours of my life I have lost waiting for technology to
Well,
catch up.
if you'd like, we could work with the pages that you have there.
Okay.
And I wouldn't waste your time unless we had just a few things to point out, because it looks like we might have a favorable review from staff. So the building has been tweaked a little bit from what you saw on the board earlier. We worked with Lafayette Square to try to attain their height requirements. They have a height requirement on the first floor of 10 feet clear, and then on the upper floors of 9 feet. So we were trying to stay low to meet the zoning requirements of the city, which are 50 feet in this area. But we had a talk with zoning, and they were open to a taller building. So now we're at 58. So that's quite a bit taller. I think we had 52 or 54 noted in what we gave you. So you can see that in that. And the Corten steel, we also put an alternate for price that could be a Nichiha panel at the front. So it's sort of a higher end cement board panel that might be at the front of where Dan was talking about the Corten steel. Also for parking, we realized we couldn't quite meet the parking standards. So also in their standards, though, they have quite a bit about screening in there. So my client agreed to add lots of trees and a nice brick pillars with sort of a wrought iron looking fence in between, all per their standards. So the parking lot would be screened from Missouri. And finally, you'll note that there's a rooftop deck that we're proposing, and we just wanted to point that out, and we checked the code on that. We'll have to have the elevator run up there and one staircase. So that will not be visible from the immediate surrounding area. Probably will be at the top of the hill, but we've provided some perspectives in those handouts we gave you so you can see that. So, and I'd say we, as was noted, we've been back and forth with the neighborhood and have really tried to come up with a building that everyone loves, so I think we're there.
Does your developer want to talk?
Would you like to talk, BJ? I think you're right. Thank you.
Thank you. Suzanne Sessions?
Lafayette Square Association Development Committee is eager to see this go. We are all in favor of it. This is the first of the development for the Shoto corridor that's going up, and it'll be before anything else up on Shoto. I think that the architect and the designers, owners worked very hard to meet our needs and changes from the time. It's basically an entirely different project than it was 6-8 months ago when we first started this. So we are pleased. I am particularly pleased by the way it is broken up into segmented inner and outer sections, especially on the Lasalle side, that gives the impression of individual townhouses with a shadow behind it. So that's really all I want to say, is that we are completely behind it, and we respect greatly the architectural and work that went into changing this to meet our needs and requirements.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Hamilton, have you got a motion?
Sure. My motion's that the Preservation Board grant preliminary approval to construct the mixed-use building with final design details completed in coordination with Cultural Resources staff.
For a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Commissioners, we've got a director's report coming up.
Oh.
Let's hear that. I am told this will take no more or less than an hour.
Whoa.
My
I
understanding,
object.
my understanding from the staff is that there's actually some kind of over-under on when the meeting is going to end tonight. And apparently I have all the power in my hands to decide who will win. So, who does the director like?
Excellent. Thank you, Director.
Can we have a bet on that?
All right.
Just like
This is going to be really fast, so if you aren't paying attention, you'll miss it. This is the director's report. I really have just 2 slides tonight. Slide number 1 is an item that has been on and off the agenda for about 6 months. This is a lovely building that is in need of a great deal of care at the corner of Compton and Locust at 3201 Locust. The building immediately to the right of this is the Washington Tabernacle Church, which is a city landmark. This is a corridor of the city, the Midtown Alley, that's going great guns these days. The church had proposed that this building be a demolition here for additional parking. As much as I think they're a great congregation and have been a great force in our city for a long time, the Preservation View District Ordinance, in my mind, simply did not allow for the demolition of this building. They appealed that demolition. I've had a number of conversations with them, but I think for now they've decided not to proceed with this appeal. And I've informed them that if they want to come back, they can always come back. I'll deny it, and they can come back to the board to seek a public hearing. I'm really hoping that something can be done here between the neighborhood leadership, political leadership, and the congregation to allow the congregation's needs to get met and this building to be preserved and reused. The last item I have is just a quick note that the Tower Grove East Historic District, or as some would call it, the Tower Grove East Historic, at the sine die session of the Board of Aldermen gained final approval from the board last week. So I anticipate within 30 to 60 days that ordinance will take effect, and then all new construction in the Tower Grove East neighborhood or additions that enlarge the building floor plate will require a permit from the Cultural Resources Office and is eligible for review by the Preservation Board.
Did we approve that raised bed right there?
That's going to be grandfathered in. Actually, as we know, since it's only new construction, everyone on the block could do that, and there's nothing that the ordinance would stop that from happening. And that concludes the director's report, which is in April. So we'll ignore that before Richard has a chance to say something to me about it.
Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, hearing that, we stand.
Do it, you can do it.
How long do I have to keep this up here? Sorry, adjourn.
It's not working.